as the Republican candidates throw their hats into the presidential election ring. Newt Gingrich is expected to be the next to announce, and we just heard from candidate former New Mexico Governor Gary Johnson. Joining me now is Republican presidential candidate and former Pennsylvania Senator Rick Santorum. Senator Santorum, welcome to the Glenn Beck program. Nice to chat with you, my friend.
Well, it's great to be with you, Judge. How you doing?
Good. Well, thank you. How are you doing?
Good.
Why do you want to be president of the United States?
Well, I don't think anyone should want to be president of the United States unless you feel like you're called to do it. And, I think we're at a very critical time in our country's history. We're at a time when we have a group of people in Washington, D.C., led by President Obama, who want to change America, the America that my grandfather came to, that was founded on this principle that limited government and the purpose of our government was to keep people free. And the president made, I think, a remarkable statement just a couple of weeks ago when he said America was not a great country. Was not a great country until Medicare, Medicaid, and unemployment insurance passed in 1965.
Oh, boy.
America was founded great. People, we need a leader, someone who's been a passionate leader, who's been conservative and principled in his time in elective office, who can win in tough elections, can defeat Democratic incumbents, who can go out and articulate a vision, a very different vision than Barack Obama has for this country.
Can you keep the government within the confines of the Constitution? Could you run the government without more borrowing? Could you not borrow money and not increase the debt, unlike the president who wants to add $2.7 trillion to it?
I'm the only person that's been out there who's actually worked and led the fight, actually drafted the Contract with America bill that ended a federal entitlement, which was welfare reform, and worked in the United States Senate to pass it. Jim DeMint and I, as well as many others in previous years who went out and argued for Social Security reform, actually reducing the cost and making Social Security solvent. And I did that in a state that had the second highest per capita population of seniors in the country, and I won re-election after having advocated for that in 1997 and 98. So I mean, you have someone who's actually been out there talking about the big issues of the day and doing more than talking, right. Being someone with answers who's actually solved these problems and can solve them in the future.
We only have about half a minute. How do you feel? You feel good about this? You seem to have a lot of fire in your belly.
Yeah, look, a lot of fire in the belly because there's a lot of fire in the belly of people across America. They know what's going on in Washington. They know this is a big election. It's the most important one in our country's history to really get back to those constitutional principles. If Obamacare is implemented, I say this in every speech, then the America that my grandfather came to is gone, and we can't let that happen.
Got it. Senator Santorum, it's a pleasure. Thank you for joining us. Next,
thank you.
Tackling the economy in a big way. Does the government work for us, or do we work for the government? Can the president's newfound nerve and muscle in executing his foreign policy be translated into success with his economic policies here at home? Tonight, the power of the presidency and domestic politics. Last week, the president united the country in a manner not seen since the days immediately following 9/11. He did so, of course, with the daring raid that killed Osama bin Laden, and he extended the euphoria with the victory laps he took around the country. The calls for pictures of the dead bin Laden, the questions about the lawfulness of the raid, the criticism of the government for giving vastly different and even contradictory versions of the bin Laden killing have all died down in deference to the relief felt by all of us that bin Laden is dead. And I say this as one who has harshly criticized and seriously questions the lawfulness of this episode. It is over, and it is a relief. The president has obviously taken the pulse of the American people, and it is beating happily when monsters are killed. So happily that last week, during the celebrations over the death of bin Laden, President Obama tried to kill this man, Anwar al-Awlaki. He is a cleric living in Yemen who has apparently encouraged violence and death here in the U.S. He is also an American, born in New Mexico in 1971. The attempt to kill him marks the first known military order by an American president to kill another American, other than via the imposition of the death penalty after a trial, since the Civil War. Even FDR opted to try German saboteurs caught in Florida and New York at the height of World War II, and when he learned that one of them was an American, spared him the death penalty. President Obama clearly knows he is riding the crest of a wave of popularity now, and he knows that Americans want their enemies slain, no matter the procedure that brings about their death. One of America's enemies that the president cannot slay is our terrible economy. Not only can he not slay it, but he has actually made it far worse with his borrowing and central planning. Have you been to the dentist lately? Well, if you have, and if you want to pay your bill over the course of the next year rather than all at once, you will need the approval of federal bureaucrats, thanks to President Obama's financial regulations. So much for your freedom of choice. Have you been to your doctor lately? If you have, then you no doubt saw him or her using a laptop to record whatever you revealed and whatever the doctor diagnosed. What you should also know is that federal bureaucrats have access to all the information in that laptop, thanks to Obamacare. So much for privacy. If you've been to the gas station recently, you see a number never before seen in American history. $4 a gallon for gasoline. So much for the stimulus packages and oil drilling moratoriums. And if you watch Fox News regularly, then you know that the federal debt, the debt of the federal government, which is now at $14.3 trillion, was at $9 trillion when President Obama entered office. And he's now asking the Congress to borrow another $2.7 trillion. Earlier today, the Republican Speaker of the House said we need to let him borrow. Let him borrow? How on earth can a problem caused by too much borrowing and spending possibly be cured by more borrowing and spending? Answer, it can't. It will just delay for another day on the watch of some future president and Congress, the inevitable crisis that comes when the borrower cannot pay back his loans. What shall we do? Well, we should carefully scrutinize the Republican candidates for president to be sure that they are true to small government, sound money principles and that they are faithful to the Constitution. Those three broad brush areas alone, the size of the government, borrowing and spending, adherence to the Constitution, will be the points of debate that will decide our future in the presidential election in 2012. Oh, and then there are first principles by which we live our lives, and we should insist that the government does the same. Don't spend money that you don't have. The people are entitled to a government that stays within the confines of the Constitution. And anyone in the government who thinks that we can all get richer just by letting the Federal Reserve print more cash should have his head examined and then be booted from the government. Tonight on Freedom Watch on the Fox Business Network at 8 p.m., we have an ATF agent who blew the whistle on his bosses. Are you ready for this? For selling machine guns to Mexican drug gangs. From New York, defending freedom. So long, America.